Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
I was wondering, why do you change people's names?
How I was brought up by my teachers is that the name is a sadhana, that the name is part of the practice that we do. The name both recognizes something about our unique dimension and our spiritual path, and it also points us in a direction. And it's a reminder about what we're doing and what our lives are about. I rarely ever give names anymore because I'm trying to get things much more simple and unelaborated and unfrilly. So I'm not saying I'll never give anybody a name again, but that's why I was giving them more regularly before. But the basic reason why I largely stopped doing it is because, by and large, people didn't really understand what initiation is. I mean, I would explain it, but, a lot of people didn't have a real deep understanding of it for themselves. They heard the words that I said, but that doesn't mean it was emanating from them. And there's two schools of thought about that. One is that initiation, samaya dīkṣā in particular, should be very, very hard to get. And you should only get samaya dīkṣā if you are 100% sure or 99% sure that the teacher that's giving you the initiation is really the teacher for you, and that you're going to follow through with this and you're going to centralize this practice in your life, etc. So that's an older way of looking at it. If you read the scriptures and descriptions by teachers of ancient days about this dīkṣā, this initiation, they would make students go through hell and high water to get this kind of initiation. You have to prove yourself, go through trials and tribulations to get this kind of initiation. But then in modern times, there's another idea that's coming around, which is that people want to have these big communities. And there was a couple teachers I had who gave initiation to basically anybody who wanted it. There was a teacher I went to one retreat with. He wasn't, like a main teacher of mine, but he's an Indian teacher from Varanasi. And I went to the one retreat I went to at his place in Varanasi. And he showed me this book that he had of 11,000 people he'd given initiation to. He was complaining to me that none of them were really serious about the practice. I was like, so stop initiating them. Maybe you got the message at this point. Other teachers I had would give samaya dīkṣā to a lot of people, and those people were continually coming and going. What I felt when I became a teacher eventually after a number of years is that when you receive an initiation like samaya dīkṣā and you don't follow through on it, and then at some point you feel it's not right for you or something like that, it becomes a burden for you. Like, it becomes this karmic luggage that someone's carrying around, something they feel badly about or vaguely guilty about, or, they feel like the anvil of doom is going to come over them or something. So I came to feel that it really wasn't good for students to receive initiations that they didn't fully understand and weren't fully prepared to inhabit, in a sense. So I just stopped doing that, and I told people who had initiations already that their initiations were void, which I think people had a really huge range of responses to that, from relief to anger to coming to me and saying, I don't care what you say, I'm still initiated. So the people who came to me and said, I don't care what you say, I'm still initiated, those were the people that should have been initiated. The people that said, I'm relieved, I was happy for. And the people that were angry were the people who couldn't humble themselves. They wouldn't come say, I still am initiated, I'm still your student. Right? So that was sort of a weird phenomenon that I wasn't really expecting. But in any case, I think it worked out rather well. from my perspective.
I'm just trying to understand the last thing you said, trying to follow the thing about anger.
Yeah, well, if I'm angry because the teacher promised me I was initiated, and I just remain angry and disgruntled rather than owning the fact that I am your student. They could have come and said, I really still want to be initiated. I feel terrible about this. I feel sad. That would have been another way, right? These are people that couldn't humble themselves to ask for anything. And of course, that's a kind of a test that teachers would give. You know, teachers of yore, if you wanted this initiation, you'd have to ask over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So if you can't ask for something, you're not really ready, right? Anyway, it all came out. Everything just shook out in a good way. And we'll see what happens. But I guess I've kind of gone back to a traditional way. I'm sure this isn't only in our time, but I'm sure there was many reasons why people did initiations and took initiations in ancient times too. You know, human pride existed then too, as we know from the Mahabharata. But I don't want to burden anyone, and I don't want to be in a state of fantasy about where people are at either. So in the beginning, the first years of Jayakula, I was just following in the footsteps of my teachers who initiated a bunch of people. And now I'm not following in those footsteps anymore.
How is that kind of initiation different from like the initiation that Brahmin boys would undertake at like 9 years old?
That initiation is into the Gayatri Mantra specifically, and becoming an adult member of the Brahmin class. So samaya dīkṣā has nothing to do with that. When you take samaya dīkṣā, you're saying, this is my path, this is my teacher. And the word samaya means promise. So you're basically pledging yourself to follow that teacher. The samaya dīkṣā is only given in tantric lineages. So it's given in Indian and Tibetan tantric lineages. So it's specifically in those lineages where the relationship with the teacher is your central practice.
Can you talk about sadhana as refuge?
My relationship to that is related to a feeling that I've had my whole life, which is of following something. I've had that feeling my whole life that I was following something. And, you know, when I was younger, little girl, like I didn't have any idea of spirituality or anything, but I had a feeling like I was moving in a direction that had sweetness, that was like in line with this sense of sweetness. And then if I would get pulled off that or start to get kind of captured by my own karmas, basically, it would be like I had lost that taste of that sweetness. So, but the sweetness wasn't just something outside of myself. It was like something that connected to me, something that I could have maybe said was like goodness or sweetness. And there was ways to move in the world that were aligned with that, and there was ways to move in the world that weren't aligned with that. And when I wasn't aligned with that, it was very uncomfortable. When I talk about sadhana as a refuge, to me it means that we can always go there in order to be in alignment with our own sweetness and basic goodness. No matter what else is happening, even if there are ways in which we're feeling compulsive or some emotions are happening that are aspects of our karma and they're uncomfortable. In the midst of all that, we can still be doing sadhana and still find our sweetness and essential goodness and feel that we're doing something that's actually helping us, right? I think of it keeping us following the right thing, even in the midst of some other things that might be going on. So that's what I mean as a refuge. I never have a doubt that if I'm doing sadhana, I never have a doubt, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? I know I'm always doing the right thing. And I can find my teacher in that sadhana too, and the feeling of her beneficence and approval, basically. Yes, you're going the right direction. You're following the right thing. even if we feel pulled, and we often feel pulled in many different directions, right? Or we just have emotions arising that could captivate us and send us into various side streams of self-concern and obsessiveness. But if we can do sadhana, then we can walk through that. We can find the path through that. Might be a razor's edge, as they say, but we can still find it. So that's what I mean. When you're feeling more impinged on and feeling more down or feeling like things aren't so great, and you cling to your sadhana during those times, that's fantastic. Because some people will stop doing sadhana during those times or let up, right? Because they're following something else now. Their emotions are overwhelming, or circumstances seem overwhelming or compelling in some way. Things could be going really well too, and that happens to people. So, I have a lover now, so I'm not going to do any sadhana for a while. If we're far enough along in our path, we've reached that kind of tipping point, well, we'll turn to our sadhana even in the midst of a lot of turmoil. That's a mature thing to do.
Could you speak on taking up space? Because I know that I take up space no matter how I use it, but I think throughout my entire life I've stifled so much action or like motion. It's gotten to a point where I feel so stagnant. I don't really feel like I'm here.
For those of us assigned female at birth, is that your case? Yes, so that's how we're trained to be. We're trained to operate in a very narrow parameter of expressiveness and space-taking. And it can become a serious habit. Like, it can become a serious thing that, feels stifling. Really. It's a long re-education to come out of that. And to understand that we arrived here with what we call a unique dimension. You arrived here with a certain configuration. You have every right to express that simply because you're here. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need to be acceptable. I'm sure when you're imagining what it would feel like to not be suppressing yourself and your movement and your space taking, you imagine, coming out of that somewhat, but do you imagine like really letting it all hang out? That's a little bit more, right? Often we still want to keep some measure of containment so that we can avoid pushback, but you're not going to avoid pushback. If we want to be ourselves in life, we have to be willing to field a certain amount of disapproval and pushback from normies. What you just said indicates that this is a very ingrained habit for you at this point. And there's a lot of fear there, I'm sure, about operating differently in the world. So, I'm just speaking from personal experience too. I think that all people who have an experience of marginalization and oppression have also an experience of policing themselves. I guess we would call that masking these days or something else, but containing yourself, squishing yourself into a smaller, more acceptable form, and trying to avoid violence and criticism and just feeling unacceptable in some ways. I would suggest decompress slowly. Don't think of doing this all at once. Think of like whatever comes to mind first when you think of how you're containing, controlling, and policing yourself. Whatever comes to mind first is like being super uncomfortable. Let that tendril out first. Let that express itself first. And then slowly, step by step, just let more out. You don't need to do it in one giant statement moment. We can say, oh, this was put upon you, but now it's internalized, so it has to be treated differently. You can take it slow, but think of it as experimenting with letting out more of your natural self-expression in particular situations. What will happen if you do this is, as you do it, it's going to feel so relaxing that it's going to start happening naturally without so much effort. So in the beginning, it's going to be terrifying But then it'll be less terrifying as you go along because you'll start to relax and the rewards will be so great that you'll be eager to do it. But that could take a long time. So don't be hard on yourself and just start somewhere with something, even if it's small. And keep doing it. Don't give up because it's really, really worth it to be able to be more freely self-expressive. If you go into it with the idea that you're going to do it in such a way, such a perfect way that no one's ever going to criticize you, you're doomed. That's just not going to happen. Right? I can see laughs of recognition happening. So that's part of your conditioning right there, that somehow you're going to get away with not making any waves. Well, you know, I hate to tell you, you live in a hugely, insanely, and deeply misogynistic culture. And it is going to happen. You are going to get things that are uncomfortable coming back at you at times. You just have to toughen up a bit. But it's worth it. It's totally worth it. I can tell you it's completely, completely worth it. So get your rebel on. But you don't have to rebel all at once. You can rebel in small ways first, and then it'll gain its own momentum. You'll see what happens. And come back and report. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jayakula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.